Yo, what's up YouTube family? It's your boy Cruz. We back at you with another hot TikTok reaction video. Today we're going to be reacting to some strange and bizarre Philadelphia experiment TikTok reactions. I'm talking about the kind that's going to have you questioning everything. With that said, if you're new to the channel, go ahead, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I drop some new hot content that you definitely don't want to miss. One more thing, these videos are for entertainment purposes only. Don't believe anything that you hear or see in these videos. Don't believe anything that I say in these videos. Always use your own discernment. Always do your own research. Let's go.
The Philadelphia experiment is a controversial theory that alleges that in 1943 during World War II, the US Navy conducted a secret experiment that resulted in the teleportation of a warship, the USS Eldridge, from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. It is believed that this experiment was based on the unified field theory. The experiment allegedly aimed to manipulate the gravitational and electromagnetic fields of the ship to create a cloaking effect, making the ship invisible and about to travel through time. During the experiment, the ship was said to have disappeared from view and teleported to Norfolk, Virginia, nearly 200 miles away, before returning to Philadelphia. Some accounts claim that the ship was visible but had a greenish glow, while others say that it was completely invisible. According to the claim, the experiment was a success, but it had unexpected and dangerous side effects. Crew members on the ship allegedly suffered from various physical and psychological effects, including nausea, disorientation, and even spontaneous combustion. Some accounts claim that crew members were fused with the ship's metal hull, while others say that some of them disappeared entirely. If the unified field theory were successfully developed, it would be a monumental breakthrough in physics and would represent a major step forward in our understanding of the universe. A complete and consistent unified field theory would provide a single mathematical framework for understanding all the fundamental forces and particles of nature, and would allow us to describe and predict the behavior of the universe on all scales.
Whoa. How many of you have heard of the Philadelphia experiment before today? And if you have, do you believe it was really true? Do you believe it really happened? Let me know down below in the comment section right now. And y'all don't be afraid to hit that like button, share, and comment, because it helps the videos get out in the algorithm to like-minded people like us that enjoy this type of content. I appreciate y'all in advance. Let's go.
This extreme experiment went wrong. Watch to the end to find out how. In 1943, there's a story about a ship called the USS Eldridge. People say it was part of an experiment in time travel at the Philadelphia Naval Yard. First test, with no one on board, worked fine. But the second test, with people, went really wrong. The ship vanished in a flash of blue light and left behind a weird green haze. Later, it was spotted near Norfolk, Virginia, by another ship, but then it disappeared again. It showed up back in Philadelphia, but the scene on board was crazy. Some sailors went crazy, some seemed to disappear and reappear, and some were stuck to the ship's hull. After that, they stopped the experiments. 40 years later, a guy named Al Bielek said he was one of the crew on that ship. He claimed they ended up time traveling to the year 2037 and beyond. Do you think he time traveled? Like and comment your thoughts below.
The Philadelphia experiment has been a mystery for over 50 years. It revolves around the US Eldridge, a US Navy destroyer that supposedly vanished during an experiment in 1943. The story began with astronomer Morris Jessup, who received a letter from Carlos Miguel Allende, a former sailor. Allende claimed that the ship became invisible and teleported after being surrounded by a green fog. Allegedly, crew members died or suffered severe injuries during the experiments. The government allegedly discontinued the project after the tragic events. The US Eldridge was later transferred to the Greek Navy and decommissioned in 1992.
I bet. I wonder why, man.
I was today years old when I found out.
Legend goes, the Philadelphia experiment was performed by the U.S. Navy in 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Yard, which briefly went by the alias Project Rainbow. A chipper tone considering the dark side we're about to look at. At this time, the US was just about to head into World War II, and the US Navy was trying to turn the ship USS Eldridge invisible. Kind of how, like, the helicarrier in the Avengers goes incognito. But instead of doing that, the military ship just dematerialized, and then several minutes later, rematerialized. The crew on board apparently suffered long-term side effects, and some of the crazy stories of teleportation were thrown around too. It probably sounds insane, but there were grounds to conduct the experiment. Dr. Franklin Reno applied Einstein's unified field theory, which successfully demonstrated a connection between gravity and electromagnetism. According to the legend, their first test actually did manage to turn the ship almost invisible, leaving behind a wisp of green fog. When it reappeared, the crew complained of severe nausea, and some went insane. With the first attempt gone haywire, the Navy changed their plan from rendering the ship completely invisible to just making it invisible to radar. The equipment was recalibrated as such, and the second test began. But something went wrong. The Eldridge disappeared in a flash of blue light and mysteriously appeared in Norfolk, Virginia, which is over 200 miles away. Those on board SS Andrew Furuseth could see the ship plain as day before them, before it disappeared and returned back to Philadelphia.
Man, that's crazy.
Some versions of the story say that the vessel had also gone approximately 10 minutes back in time. And when the ship came back, the crew members refused to the bulkheads, suffered mental disorders, and some were uncontrollably phasing in and out of invisibility. It was also suggested that the surviving crew members were brainwashed in forgetting that the experiment ever happened at all. Probably a good thing in this case, but the story doesn't end there. Yes, after 2 botched attempts, the Navy decided to abandon the project, but the effects of the experiment have lasted much longer, long enough to have books written and movies made about them.
Man.
In 1943,
I wonder why did it go to Virginia out of all places, man, then go back? That's one question that I just wondered. That's, you know, just watching those clips, man, I'm asking myself, why Virginia? Why Virginia? Why Norfolk, Virginia? I wonder. I got to do my research, though, y'all. If you know, let me know down below in the comment section.
U.S. Navy would figure out how to open up a portal. This was called Operation Ghost, and this would take place in the Philadelphia shipping yard. The boat they used for this experiment was called the USS Eldridge, and it was equipped with a new advanced engine. When this engine started up, it would create a magnetic field around the ship, and it would turn it invisible. At least this is what they thought. So they would crank up the engine, and they would notice this green fog would start to expand around the ship. They waited a few moments, and then the smoke was clear. They noticed the ship was gone, and this operation was a success. They noticed the ship would start pinging on their GPS systems. Now this ship that disappeared would pop up 250 miles away in Norfolk, Virginia. This ship stayed there for around 10 minutes, and then it would dematerialize and pop back up in Philadelphia. Now it was crew members standing on the shores. They would rush out to the ship and look for survivors. They noticed the people were dead, some disappeared, some had burn wounds, and a lot of their body parts were infused in the walls. Now legend has it, everyone died on the ship. One thing you must know is that you can't leave this realm with your physical body. That portal will devour your flesh, and it will only leave your soul. And they would figure that out the hard way. Peace and Ashe.
Boy, that's exactly what they went through, a portal. Now ask yourself this. Man, did these people, man, did they ask to be in the experiment, man? Did these people sign up to be in the experiment, man? That's why I couldn't join no army, man. Man, forget that. I ain't joining no military. Man, they will experiment on you, man. Unwillingly, too. Boy, that's...
The Philadelphia experiment, as I previously stated, locked up with the Phoenix Project, and it could only lock up on a very critical date. And that critical date was the 12th of August, 1943, and the 12th of August, 1983. Theoretically, it could have locked up in 1963, but there was no ongoing experiment at that time, such as the Phoenix Project, which was required. Dr. John Van Neumann was, of course, the second and final director of the Philadelphia experiment. He was also the first director of the Phoenix Project when it came online after the war, and it went through several phases. The important phase of the Phoenix Project was from 1975 through 1983, when they developed the capability of time travel and the time tunnels, as Dr. Carl Sagan liked to call them, the wormholes in space. Wormholes in space and time. They had the capability and it was fully functional. Someone had to know, in order to get these two experiments on either end to lock up, that there were critical dates in which it would work and the rest of the years in between it would not work. And someone had to communicate this information to both ends. And this is the thrust of my discussion, and what happened and why this whole thing locked up and what some of the mechanics of, and technology of time.
Notice how he said in 1943, man, that they've been having this technology to open up portals or wormholes. Man, it's 2024, almost 2025, man. Think about that. And when I tell you to think about that, all I want you to do is question yourself, question everything. Ask yourself, if they could do that, what else could they do?
The coil, the battery, everything is in here. If you want to take a picture, you're welcome. And it has a little LED in the back to let you know that it's on. Huge filter capacitor to smooth out the current. I didn't show every detail of the circuit. It's not really necessary. But now we got a very interesting function on this. If I remember correctly, Preston, the surface with the 4 screws is the...
One day when
If I remember correctly, Preston, the surface with the 4 screws is the output side, right? Right. And if you turn it to where the little legs for this box are, it's a standard ordinary Radio Shack or whatever plastic box. That's the vacuum cleaner side. And you also have here a little adjustment pot there in order to change the frequency. Right. Right. And the coil sits in here, literally. All right, I have a little screwdriver in the case I think I can use. In any case, I don't know how many of you people are sensitive, but we're going to find out. Turn this thing on. It's now on, the little red light. See how many people feel anything. Anything at all. It's on. You know, those who are scientists and engineers usually are not too sensitive to subtle effects, we'll put it that way. Little red light says it's on. And some people have noticed if I turn it edgewise, I get a terrible headache. Not trying to suggest anything, but I want to see whether anybody feels anything in here. Okay, now if you turn it this way, it acts like a vacuum cleaner, a very strange vacuum cleaner. It doesn't suck dirt, doesn't suck air. It will react in a metaphysical manner. I have played with this thing now for some 6 months, more than 6 months, perhaps 8. And I found the frequency setting is fairly critical for some people. But if you have a problem with how shall I put it, an energy implant, not the solid crystal type which the aliens and or the government use, but an energy type implant, this device will pull it off the body. If you have problems with, well, you could almost say ET attacks. If you have problems with entities of any type which are attacking you, this thing will usually end the problem. They don't like it. I've used it more than once for that purpose. including up in North Carolina recently, where we had an infestation of ETs at a certain symposium, which Preston and I and Duncan were at. They didn't like this thing at all. They left. They were not physically present in the sense of being you or I or anyone else in the physical, normal reality. They were present in an altered or parallel reality. Now, this gets into a very interesting aspect, which I don't have time to cover fully, but very briefly. There is alternate realities. There are several of them. The government does have means to cross over into these other realities. There's a project called Project Winter Haven, which is developed parallel to the Montauk Project, probably under the cover of the Phoenix Project. And this is a project for interdimensional travel. And by using interdimensional travel techniques, some of these so-called spirits turn out to be quite real, because what is the spirit world but another reality? Quite physical to their own references. Your dream world is quite physical when you're in it. Therefore, one has to come up with a question: what is reality? We think we know what it is because we can hit a table. If you hit a car under a brick wall, you smash the car, you might smash yourself. If you could do an alternate reality shift quickly enough, you wouldn't hit the wall. Who knows what you'd hit in the other one? But this gets into a very strange and difficult area to analyze. What is reality? We accept ours as real because we've been educated to it. We feel it. We know it every day. But there are other realities, and other people there that know their reality as real. They probably look at us as ghosts, if you will. But there is occasionally crossover under certain conditions, dimensional changes, dimensional doorways, which can be artificially created, or naturally they exist without artificial creation. But a device like this can prove useful in terms of if you've got uninvited visitors that you don't like. Okay. We don't have it in production yet, and I can't really give a price. This is one experimental unit. Preston had built one or two others on a breadboard, which are about 5 times this, over a 12 by 12 inch breadboard. But if we do get it in production, it's I can put it this way: it'll be more than $100, and it'll be less than $1,000. The circuit is fairly simple, but we have to consider a number of aspects: frequency stability, adjustability, durability. We still don't really know how durable that transistor is. It's a low voltage device, as most germaniums were in the past. Typically, a germanium had a VCE rating of about 10 volts, 9 volts to 12 volts, 15 was high. This is a 9 volt transistor. These are hand-picked to handle about 25 volts. And that's one of the unknowns at this point, is how stable is that transistor against transients. You won't get much transients with a big filter cap on a battery. But it might if you're in an area where, let's say, there was a powerful radar transmitter or some other very powerful electromagnetic transmitting device. Anything from an FM transmitter to a TV transmitter. They'll put up a lot of... Anything from an FM transmitter to a TV transmitter. They'll put up a lot of voltage if you're too close. And if the circuit board happens to be critical in terms of the layout, the length of the leads, and you hit a quarter wavelength lead, you can build up a rather high voltage internally on a transistor because of the lead lengths on the board. Right, that's the other aspect. The coil is directly connected. Right. Okay, I'll see if I can find a screwdriver and take the lid off so you can see what it looks like.
Say, all I gotta ask y'all is, do you believe him? You think he capping? Well, let me know down below in the comment section.
In October 1943, the U.S. Navy allegedly rendered the USS Eldridge invisible and teleported it from Philadelphia to Norfolk using powerful electromagnetic fields. Some believe Nikola Tesla's research contributed to this. The ship supposedly traveled to another dimension and returned with dire consequences for the crew. Known as the Philadelphia Experiment, it remains one of the most intriguing mysteries. Like and subscribe to 5 Minute History for more mysteries.
How did this man travel 800 years into the future? In 1943, an experiment called the Philadelphia Project was conducted in the attempt to use Einstein's unified field theory to make the USS Eldridge invisible. However, things went wrong, and the warship started phasing in and out of time. A survivor, Albalek, and his brother Duncan jumped overboard for safety. When they awoke, they found themselves being treated in a hospital for radiation burns in the year 2137, where he reported that a climate catastrophe had already altered the world, and in the wake of World War III, the U.S. is no more. Subsequently, he was pulled further into the future to the year 2749, where he lived for 2 years, reporting yet again that there was peace on Earth, as everyone lived in mobile floating cities, controlled by a super AI robot. He was then pulled back to his original timeline, where he eventually worked on the Montauk Project. But even though the government has disavowed him, the question we should be asking is,
Montauk. Oh, shoot, this fit to get deep, man. This seems like this is getting deeper and deeper, better and better, man. The Philadelphia experiment, for y'all who don't know, man, it's a legendary experiment and story, man, out there in the conspiracy world, man. This is one of them top hitters, man. Y'all let me know so far if y'all liking this video or not, man. Let me know in the comment section. And if you do, like. And if you don't like it, hit dislike. You know what I'm saying? Thumbs down. Hit them, man. Don't be scared. If you don't like it, hit thumbs down, man. If you like it, hit thumbs up, man. It's cool, man. Comment and share. Help the video get out in the algorithm, man. That's all I'm asking y'all. Let's go.
Hello, my name is Alfred Bielik, more commonly known as Al Bielik. Original family name is Edward Cameron. I have been involved in the Philadelphia experiment, the Montauk Project, time travel, alien connections of the Montauk Project, and some other projects, all of which have been secret over the years, most of which have never been declassified. I wound up in the 28th century, and this was in a time period of 2749 to 2751 AD. Talk about changes in civilization, society, and everything else. It was drastically changed from what we saw in 2137, as this is now 600 years later. The cities were enormous, the cities were beautiful. They had ground-based cities, much as we have always had them, but they also had something else, floating cities. Floating cities, due to anti-gravity techniques being perfected sufficiently that they could float an entire city, which was perhaps not as large as any of our current cities. It was round, or very nearly round, but it floated on this platform and they could move the city any place they wanted, remaining floating in the air, 4,000 or 5,000 feet above the ground perhaps, or a little less, depending on what they wanted. But the size of the city was vertical rather than horizontal, 2,200 stories high. That's about 2.5 miles. These cities could move anywhere on the planet. Basically, they stayed hovering and floating. If they didn't like a particular location, they moved somewhere else. There wasn't that much traffic in moving cities, I can assure you, because the world population in that era, the 28th century, was only 500 million, and I was instructed later that was where they had held it for centuries. There would be no more than approximately 500 million population. Some of the features of this, let's start from the political standpoint. As I learned, all of these cities, whether they're ground-based cities, which the majority were, because they had to do manufacturing, they had to have agriculture and various other things to supply the needs of civilization. But all of them, whether floating or ground-based, were rather interesting in their governmental form. They had essentially no government. There's no government as we know it today. There was no money, there's no banks, there's no political jurisdictions, and it resolved down to what would be best called a city-state structure, where the city is the state, and any other cities from that one are independent and operate in their own independent manner. So that was the major change there. There was no elected government, there was no appointed government, there was no government as we had ever seen it in the past. As I found out, each city was run by an intelligent computer, synthetic intelligence, synthetic consciousness, a highly radioactive crystalline structure. Who built them, I had no idea. Nobody seemed to know, but they've been there for hundreds of years. And this computer ran the entire city. There were guidelines set down, there were law books, but no courts. There were guidelines set down as to how you're to behave, what your parameters were. Within these parameters, anything went. Anything was not considered kosher within this realm, this parameter limit, would be expressed as a yellow zone, i.e. a zone that you don't want to go into and you don't want to become involved in that type of behavior. If you got out into that area, you were given an invite for a reprimand to the computer, which there was one in every city, running each city. You would literally be called in for shall we say, an interview or an audience with the computer, and you would be advised that you had broken the law, but it wasn't considered a felony, it was a misdemeanor. And such. If you were judged guilty, you were sent off to one of the work camps for whatever purpose they did in the work camps. Very much like today, I presume, where any kind of labor, menial or otherwise, had to be done was done. And that was compulsory, that was not voluntary. If you were called in because you had gone outside the yellow zone into what is called the red zone, which is basically what you would today call a felony offense, you were immediately called in for an interview. You were examined, looked at, talked to, and if the computer at that point thought that you were rehabilitable, that you could learn again to be sociable and within the social bounds of normalcy, you were given one more chance. If the computer decided that you were not capable of fitting into society, you were terminated right then and there. Now, there were other people who didn't feel like they could fit into the society, but had not yet committed any of the so-called offenses. Literally, they were allowed to leave. The word was, if you don't like it here, go live somewhere else. Go out in the boonies if you want, live as a hermit, we don't care. And many did. I do not know what percentage. I was told that quite a lot of people had left the cities and gone out in the boondocks. Whether they formed communities or not, I never did find out. If you weren't required to work, which no one was required to, other than their social obligation, which was well inculcated into the kids, that you had an obligation to contribute to society, to pay for what you have been using and had inherited, for which no money was involved. A sort of credit system was still functional, but otherwise, except for fairly large credit purchases, if that is the right term, they didn't really keep track of very much. It was considered quite free as long as you were able to make some contributions and nobody overloaded the system with demands. That happened very seldom, that there was an overload of demand for goods and services. So as a result of that, there was very little abuse of the system. Now, in this period of time, talking with many people, making friends, I had a number of questions. Who built this computer system? That was my first and foremost question. Who maintains it? What happens when it breaks down? Very common questions. No common answer. And very much uncommon answers. First question about the cities, who built them, who maintains them, who maintains the computers, was rather hard to answer and get an answer to. No one really knew much about the history of the construction of the city or how it ran, other than the computer, and you couldn't request an interview. You couldn't request to go in and ask questions. The aspect of how these computers communicated with each other was unknown, but it did make, the one I talked with did make a number of interesting statements over a period of time. They had been around for about 250 years in this format and this system.
Man, what y'all think about that? Would that be a society that you would like to live in, a world or city that you would like to live in, floating cities and stuff like that, and all type of other amenities? Let me know down below in the comment section. Me personally, no.
Aside from my legal name, which is on my birth certificate of Bielik, I was born in 1916. The best that I've been able to determine from my own memories and what comes up, 4 August 1916, was born Edward A. Cameron, and in 1917, I believe 15 May, this guy was born in his original body, Duncan Cameron, or whatever they called him at the time. And we were born into a family with considerable amounts of money, not really wealthy, but they were well off. And we didn't hurt for money, we didn't hurt for the means for an education. Came time we went to school, he wound up in the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, according to his readings. Took a PhD in physics in 1939. I, in the meantime, went to University of Princeton, bachelor's and master's degree, and so far as I can determine, again, from memories, took a PhD in physics from Harvard in 1939, both of us in the summer. It was arranged by our inimitable father, who had a great deal of influence with the Navy and apparently political clout in various sections and parts of the government. We do not understand how he got these connections. We don't know anything about them. There are no documents to show this. He himself served in the Navy in World War I, apparently as an ordinary recruit, did a 20-year stint, retired. At what status, we don't know. Again, the retirement papers are missing, the separation papers. We do not know whether he got involved in intelligence or not, but it would appear that he did because of its subsequent events. He didn't work, from everything we know, from that point on. He had money from the family, and he became an ardent admirer of sailboats and decided to build his own. He built one, raced it, took some trophies, would sell it and build another. In between, he was traveling back and forth to Europe, and as had been previously mentioned, he became involved in the smuggling of German scientists to the U.S. This ceased in 1939 when the Cold War turned to a hot war. But he had connections. We don't know how they were obtained, where they went, but it was determined that the two of us would become part of this project. When we finished our education, we were invited to join and to enlist in the Navy. We were both given commissions, September 1939. And we then did about 3 months at Provincetown, Rhode Island Academy, the naval officers. In those days, they did the so-called 90-day wonder business. But we were already fairly well prepared. We didn't go through Annapolis or anything like this. And then we were sent to the project. But we did a lot of shuttling back and forth as part of our job. And one of the reasons why we were chosen was that the Navy wanted two people to represent their interests and keep full tabs on what was going on in the tests and the development of the program, who were technically competent to report in detail what was going on. And there was also another aspect of this involved, that aside from Tesla, who did not have a good formal education, he started out in 1979. His father died, and his first year in the university he was terminated, and he had to go to work. He came to the U.S. in '84. He had enormous insight and an incredible intuitive insight, and solved his problems in that manner very competently. He developed what was even more important, the so-called Levinson time equations. With that as a background, they were able then to go on and develop the whole system of the visibility project as applied to a large part object. Vice Admiral Hal Bowen Sr., who was the then director of the Office of Naval Engineering, which was abolished in '46, but he was in charge of all of the research work for the Navy. And he told us, gentlemen, you may as well know, we will be at war with Japan within 48 to 72 hours. We expect to hit Pearl Harbor. You're not going back there. You're too valuable. So we're going to leave you in San Francisco until your tour is over, which is the home base for the Pennsylvania. You do office work. You can enjoy some leave times. You might as well enjoy it, because when you go back to the Institute, there'll be no leaves and there'll be nothing but hard work. So we did. Tesla was given a ship for his full-size tests with crew. And that happened to be a battleship, unknown. But in wartime, apparently, politics has a bit of pull, and the politics coming from the President of the United States, he could probably order the Secretary of the Navy to supply any kind of ship that Tesla wanted. So he got a battleship. The equipment was designed, of course, by Tesla with a lot of work and cooperation, and you might say also a lot of fighting between Tesla and Von Neumann. Tesla was director, Von Neumann was, I guess, assistant. They didn't agree on everything. Von Neumann had a great deal of respect for Tesla's ability, but they didn't agree about everything. Tesla was insisting, as the date approached for the tests on the battleship with personnel, that they were going to have a very severe problem with personnel. He said flatly, says you cannot employ the large amounts of power required to make a ship of this size invisible without having a very disastrous effect on the heads of the people, or the minds, or the bodies of the personnel involved, because we're talking megawatts of RF power, enormous amounts of power, and the coils, which in the early phases were like degaussing coils, were wrapped around the hull of the ship. The later design was a set of 4 coils mounted on the deck of the ship, specially designed Tesla conical-shaped designs. And just interestingly enough, every transformer design ever built by Nikola Tesla was in conical. It was not round core. It was conically shaped, tapering towards a point at the top.
Dang, man. So basically what he's saying is Tesla warned these guys, and they still did what they did and cause all this harm, man. And you know, they went on with the experiment anyway, which is crazy, but it's not so far-fetched, because when you dealing with science, man, some scientists don't care. They just want to get, you know, they want to get their experiment off and get their answers, and they come to their hypotheses, you know, come to their own conclusions. You know what I'm saying? Y'all let me know what y'all think about that in the comment section down below.
And eventually I started seeing some very strange things on TV. I started asking questions. And the first thing I noted was the references geographically to the United States, and I noticed severe changes in the coastlines and the interior, and the fact that Europe didn't look at all like when I had remembered it. And I started asking questions. What's happened? What's been going on? That's when they said, I want to see maps of what's happened and some description. Said, it looks like there's been major earth changes. And I said, yes, there have been. It all happened in the period between the beginning of the 21st century and basically the year 2025. Now, all right, what happened? So they told me, they showed me maps, and did describe it briefly. The east coast of the United States was rather heavily changed, not as much as the west coast, but neither one, for that matter. None of the changes I saw would fit some of the very far out maps promulgated in the late 20th century by various people such as the I Am America group and Michael Gordon Scallion and his series of maps. They were what I would consider the worst case possible scenario, and it didn't happen that way. But what I did see was changes in the East Coast, particularly when you went south towards where Georgia, Carolinas and Georgia is. The Georgia coastline going inland, so that Atlanta, instead of being about 100 miles from the ocean, was only 3 miles from the ocean. A lot of the east coast of Georgia was gone. Parts of North Carolina had been chopped off. Florida was gone completely, except for the area of the Panhandle.
Was this on the TV programs that you saw, or did they give you a map?
I saw this in references on the TV program, which they showed pictures of the coastline in reference to something else that we're dealing with. And I see this, I said, what is this? This isn't the way I remember it. So that's when I started asking what's going on, and they gave me the maps. The Gulf Coast was drastically changed. There was about a 50-mile wide swath north of where we knew the Gulf Coast to be, as it is today, in the beginning of the 21st century. And about 50 miles wide was just gone. It was underwater, which means New Orleans was gone, Houston was gone, Corpus Christi, Texas was gone as such, though it was just barely, because that's a little higher ground there. It was just lowlands that went. And I don't think it was geographic upheaval. It was just a case of the ocean waters have been rising, plus other changes. And the big change in the middle of the country was that the Mississippi became an inland waterway, and a rather wide one, all the way up to the Great Lakes, which then became one lake. Part of the original lakes disappeared, and other parts sank, so that you had one large lake there, which joined with the St. Lawrence Seaway, which became a very large seaway. And the rest of the U.S., the western part, to the other side of the new Mississippi basin, if you will, was all there essentially intact, with the exception of California and parts of Oregon and small parts of Washington. California suffered from where the San Andreas Fault came inland. San Andreas Fault cuts into California between San Francisco and San Jose. That's where it cuts inland and is no longer in the ocean, but is cutting across land. And it goes down basically central California, so that when you get past Los Angeles, it winds up cutting through the middle of the Salton Sea. And much of that section west of that fault line, of the San Andreas Fault line, wound up in the ocean, not all of it. San Diego was gone, parts of Southern California was gone, but the strange part was where Los Angeles was, parts of it were still left. The coastal sections, the beach country was gone, the beach areas were collapsed, the cliffs were collapsed, but areas of the higher sections of Beverly Hills were still there. Pasadena was still there. Downtown Los Angeles is still referred to as the island, because it was on a rock, and there's literally an island there, even now, Well, it's certainly not underwater, but it winds up being surrounded by water. So there were a lot of changes that way.
Feeling rage, feeling fire in my brain, feel insane, and it's only feel a flame, 45 to my brain, praying more, please no glory.
Man, that's crazy, man. Think about how many people lost their lives and went missing from that experiment and were never heard about ever again. And imagine what their families were told, if their families were even told anything. That's crazy, man. Crazy, crazy world we live in, man. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section. What would you do in that predicament? Would you have jumped off, or would you have stayed there and touched the wall?
The Earth's biorhythms are only draw in terms of how they peak out. They produce literally a spike. 12 August, 12 August, 12 August, in 20-year intervals of concern to us, and also 2003. Here sat the Eldridge until it moved. And here sat the Phoenix Project. It did not move. It was rather well anchored. And in the middle in '63, there's essentially nothing. There's another peculiar thing happens. As you start this business of going through time, let's mark this as 43, let's mark this as 63, and let's mark this as 83. You are looking at it on sidewise again. You're actually a full circle for the 40 years. It takes 40 years to go the full circle of 20 years where you have a synchronization point, you're 180 out of phase, which can be represented as a sine wave, like so, with a crossover point in 63. But this is a flat representation. This doesn't mean it's reversing polarity per se, but it does. The problem was created, and the problem was created is this. Time also has waves. Like a standing wave in electromagnetic theory on an RF transmission line, if you don't damp it properly and its characteristic impedance, let us show theoretically a nice little line where we have RF on it, properly terminated, it's even, of constant voltage, and as we say, the standing wave ratio is 1. That means you got perfect transmission and there are no waves coming back at you. If this thing is not properly terminated out here in the characteristic impedance of the source and the transmission line, whatever you're using, you start to get funny little things. These things start to build up, and you start to come down here to a lower level, and these start to build up, and you start coming to a lower level. You build up standing waves, and these things go up and they come back. And when it gets bad enough, you have enormous voltage levels. And theoretically, they can go unterminated out at this end. Theoretically, can go to infinity. They don't, for practical reasons. But you get the same problem in time. 10 minutes. Got it. And this means something very extraordinary. If you have standing waves in time, you will find that this time factor starts doing this. The standing waves produce a phenomena of standing waves which go back and forth, and if you start whipping through the 63 point, the crossover point, and create a reverse time wave, you then have, in the reality in which you're dealing, the artificial reality as well as coupled to both ends, and most particularly in the 83 end where the Phoenix Project is, you can generate, and they were in the process of generating a reverse time wave. What happens if you have a forward and reverse time wave hitting the physical Earth at the same time? As I found out very recently, Dr. Van Neumann knew what the problem was and knew what could result. And they had to set up a special team prior to the critical date of 12 August 83 to handle the problem. Had they not found the correct team of scientists, there were 4 involved: Dr. Van Neumann, a second man whom I know but I will not give the name of because he doesn't want to give him, and 2 scientists from the future. Yes, I did say the future, because with Montauk they could go into the future or the past. They got a team together. They moved hardware to 1963 to provide damping, because they knew that if this thing was not damped sufficiently, at least to a critical level, to prevent the reverse time wave from hitting, do you have any idea what would have happened? It would have torn the entire tectonic plate structure of the North American continent apart, ripped off the entire top level of the North American continent, probably to the Rocky Mountains. To a depth of 500 to 700 feet, the ocean would have roared in and we would have been back in the Stone Age instantly. That is what they faced, and that is what they had to prevent. And since I'm here talking to you today, they prevented it. Or they wouldn't be here, any of us. That was the problem they faced, and that is what they did correct. There was a code name for that project. The code name was Atlanticus, not.
Ooh, man, y'all think old Al was on to something, man? You think he know what he talking about? Or is he just bullcorning, man? That Philadelphia experiment situation messes mine up a little bit. Y'all let me know what y'all think about that down below in the comment section. And that's the video. If you've been kicking with me from the jump to now, man, I sure appreciate it, man, because it's been a good one. It's been a real good one. It's your boy Koozie, man. I'm out. Until next time. See ya. Y'all don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and share, and comment down below what y'all think about the video, because it helps the video go further in the algorithm and get to other people with like-minded thoughts and ideas just like us. You know, want to see this type of content, man. That's all I'm